my dear students. Hope you are all keeping yourself safe and doing well. In this class, we are going to discuss nutritional importance of commonly used food items including fruits and vegetables. Rather, we are going to discuss the importance of macromolecules in our diet. Next please. Now food, what is food? Food is something that all living things need to consume, mainly as a fuel, to sustain their growth and vital processes and to furnish energy. So, substances consisting essentially, food substances consisting essentially of protein, carbohydrate, fat and other nutrients like vitamins, minerals, dietary fibers and of course water. Water is of course is a part of the total nutritional requirement. It's a major part. The absorption and utilization of food by the body is fundamental to nutrition and is facilitated by our digestion. Next please. Now, food sources mainly of two types. One from the plants which convert solar energy to food by photosynthesis. They are the primary food source. The next please. The other source are the animals that feed on plants, often serve as sources of food for the other animals. So we can have grossly two types of food source, one from the animal source, another from the plant source. Next please. Now, if you go back to the history, you will find food is played a very important role in globalization. From the ancient time, the people have gone from his territory to other territory. It has brought cultural exchanges, it has got businesses exchanges and ultimately the total planet is under the cultural mixing and today we have been exposed to all sorts of cultures in different areas of the planet. So that is the total globalization we are having nowadays. So if you go back to the previous history, then you will see hunting and gathering, horticulture, pastoralism and the development of agriculture are the primary means by which humans have adapted to their environments to feed themselves. It was the primary development from the primary stages to the modern world. So now we can cultivate lot of foods by our different modern techniques and agricultural development has been very progressed. So we are now growing different types of food in a very economic way and so to feed all the people of the planets. Food has long served as a carrier of culture in human societies and has been a driving force for globalization that I have already discussed. This was especially in the case during the early phases of European trade and colonial expansion. Foods such as hot red pepper, corn or maize and sweet potatoes spread throughout Europe to Africa and ultimately to Asia. That's why food has ultimately got the avenue from Europe to Asia and Africa, and there is changes in the human races considering culture, their economy, their business and their relationships. So if you can recall the adventure or discovery of Columbus in way back 1500 years, so where he actually tried to come to India, where to get some good spices are always available, but because of the land connections was interrupted that time, and though ultimately he went to discover a separate land, separate territory, and the United States of America was discovered. So this is way the man moved from one place to other place because of the food, because of the availability of the food, and that has made them culturally rich. Next please. Now, principal constituents of the foods. What we take usually contains carbohydrates mainly, which are the major source of energy, along with proteins, which are the building blocks, and fats, most concentrated source, and these are the storage form of energy also. These are the three principal foodstuffs we require to consume, along with vitamins play a vital role for maintaining normal growth and the health. Of course, some of the minerals which we regularly require to intake, and of course water, and dietary fiber plays a special role, though they are not absorbed, but they are very much important in our diet. However, carbohydrates, proteins and fats supply 90% of the dry weight of the diet and 100% of its energy. Next please. So, it is more about carbohydrates. It is the main source of energy for the body. It is an easy energy source, easy for the body to break down. 1 gram contains 4.1 kilocalorie, found in almost all the food sources. Simple and complex, both type of carbohydrates are in our diet. So they have, both of them have separate important roles. Simple carbs or monosaccharides like glucose, they are used up very fast. So they raises the blood glucose level very fast. But fibrous foods have complex carbs which sustain you longer, and the blood glucose rise after that type of food is very slow. So we will discuss on this aspect later on, because that is a very important, that why should we take complex carbohydrates in our diet, and that should be included in our food. Energy should mostly, or 60 to 70% should be derived from carbohydrates and its healthy sources in our normal diet. This includes whole grains, millets like brown rice, whole wheat, maize, bajra, oats, ragi, etc. fresh whole fruits and legumes also contains a significant amount of carbohydrates. Next please. So here you have to know about the glycemic index. So what is glycemic index and what is the glycemic response, that you have to know. Then you can design or advise to a patient about your food. So glycemic index, the glycemic index or GI estimates how much each gram of available carbohydrate, that is total carbohydrate minus fiber, in a food raises a person's blood glucose level for the following following consumption of the food relative to consumption of glucose. So as glucose is used up very rapidly and raises the blood sugar very rapidly, so in terms of glucose, how much the other carbohydrates or other foods actually raises the blood glucose. And blood glucose when raises, the insulin secretion starts. So that is the response you will be able to calculate by knowing the glycemic index of a particular food. Next please. Here is some examples of different foods with their glycemic index. There are three categories: high glycemic index, medium glycemic index and low glycemic index. The high glycemic index, where the glycemic index is 70 and above. The medium is 56 to 69 and low GI is 55 and it's below. So up to 55 is the low GI. Now if you just go through this chart, you will find some of the diets with low glycemic index. Here you can see most fruits and vegetables, that is heading the list, and legumes, pulse, some whole intact grains, nuts, that is also less glycemic index, including fructose. And you will be happy to know the chocolate, ice cream also have low glycemic index. Whereas you can see what is the high glycemic index: potato, white rice, white bread, they are all having high glycemic index. So accordingly you can design or plan a diet and advise the type of patients you require to advise about the nutritional aspect. So disease is not all about prescribing some medicines. You have to also know how to advise about their diet. So that is the importance of going through these classes. Next please. So here the advantage of the low glycemic index diet, you can just have some of the highlighted here. Carbohydrates with a low GI value of 55 or less are more slowly digested, as I have already told, more slowly absorbed and as well as metabolized, and cause a lower and slower rise in the blood glucose levels in your. So they are very much helpful and reduce the increased insulin, they increase the insulin sensitivity. Where the insulin sensitivity is lost, especially in the diabetes persons, almost reduced, they help to increase the insulin sensitivity. As the insulin response is, if it is very high after a meal, then the insulin is almost going to observed as insulin resistance. The person that time is said to be insulin resistant. But when low, because that person is requiring more insulin to be secreted to use up that much of carbohydrate load. So when you are taking a low glycemic index diet, then glucose is raises slowly. So insulin is also requires not to be secreted all at a time. So that will also be reduced. So insulin sensitivity will be increased. Reduced adiposity, very important nowadays. You have to know adiposity, I have discussed later, obesity also. Reduce LDL cholesterol, that is the bad cholesterol, you know, and TG, triglyceride, and increase HDL, which is a good cholesterol. Reduce risk of type 2 diabetes. Yeah, naturally it will reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes, reduce risk of hypertension as well as coronary artery disease, is beneficial for weight management also. Reduce inflammatory markers such as C-reactive protein and IL-6, and they impart more antioxidant activity. So as a whole, you should try to formulate your diet with the foods containing low glycemic index. Next please. Regarding lipids, which is also a principal constituent in our diet, most concentrated source of energy, less space as it is an hydrophobic, forms energy reserves in the body and is mainly stored under the skin. The 1 gram lipid contains 9.3 kilocalorie, which is very high in terms to carbohydrate. And main source of the lipid are butter, ghee, milk, fish, meat, nuts and oils. Also huge energy source but harder to break down because fats required to be mobilized from the stored depot, then they are transported to periphery or the liver, then they require for digestion beta oxidation, and thereafter they require a longer processes to supply fuel or energy than the carbohydrate metabolism, which can directly be used up. So it takes, its metabolism is little complex, takes higher time, and thereafter when a patient's on, or when a person is on fasting, the first carbohydrates are used up, which are stored carbohydrate like glycogen. Thereafter, the gluconeogenesis starts, where the proteins and other gluconeogenic substances are used up. Now, ultimately, maybe after 48 to 72 hours, the lipid starts mobilized. So, these are mainly forms energy reserves of the body. Now, regarding the type of lipids we require to intake, we have to be very selective. Now, basically on the basis of fatty acids characteristics, there are 3 types of lipids we consume: saturated fatty acid or SAFA, monounsaturated fatty acids or MUFA, and polyunsaturated fatty acids or PUFA. Now, what amount of lipid we should take and what type of lipid we should prefer, because the lipids are mainly present in different sources and also in the cooking oil. So you have to know how much lipid you require in your diet. You require lipid because lipid have many roles in our body necessary to maintain membranes, produced steroid hormones, vitamin D, etc. So, as per the present concept, cooking oil is recommended, ideal, which contains all those 3 types of fatty acids in 1:1:1 ratios. That means not singly any type of fatty acids are advisable. Only FUFA or only SAFA you should not have. And so judiciously you have to know what are the different oils that supply this type of fatty acids combinations, and the total caloric intake from the lipid should not be more than 20 to 30%. That is very important. So a little amount of lipid is allowed in your regular diet. Next please. Now we will come to the proteins. So that is very, very important. As I have already told you, they are building blocks of our body, play structural and functional role in all living cells. They are essential for growth and repair of the body tissues, part of almost everything in our bodies: enzymes, antibodies, hair, nails, muscle tissue, supports of cells, that is extracellular matrix, transporters and channels across the cell membrane. All is made up of different types of proteins. So we require proteins to build up our body and maintain the biological system. 1 gram of protein gives rise to 4.1 kilocalorie. Though they supplies similar quantity of energy in comparison to carbohydrates, but usually proteins are not used for the calorific value. Protein are not spared if carbohydrate is present in our body. It's only protein is spared when carbohydrate is lost, especially in the sequence of prolonged fasting or due to some illness. So carbohydrate has a protein sparing effect. Next please. Now amino acids are the building blocks of proteins that you know already in your class. So there are some proteins which may be containing all sorts of amino acids. Now what are the different amino acids which are essential? That you should recall. What are the amino acids we require to have must in our diet, and what are the proteins, what kind of proteins that contains the type of amino acids? They are considered as first class protein. Now, in terms of human nutrition, proteins are again of two types depending on their source. One from the animal protein like milk, fish, cheese, meat, egg. In the layman's term it is known as non-veg. But vegetables of plant protein such as pulse, soya beans, nuts and grains also contains good amount of good quality of proteins. So plants can also give you sufficient number of essential amino acids, because all the herbivorous animals like elephants, buffaloes, they are thriving on the plants itself, and they are very strengthful animals. So proteins can be of two sources, that you should remember. And animal proteins, though supposed to be conventionally is better, but this is to be scientifically analyzed. Proteins are metabolized to provide energy when the body is starved, as I have already told you, and is devoid of any carbohydrate source. Next please. Now regarding protein intake, protein metabolism, protein absorption and utility of the protein, we should be acquainted with certain things, one of which is nitrogen balance. So main nitrogen content in our body is protein. So when body has sufficient protein, whatever we are taking, I have losing less than that, so we are in a positive balance. And whenever the reverse, that means whatever we are losing, is more than whatever we are taking, then it will be the negative nitrogen balance. So, what is positive nitrogen balance? This is a state in which the nitrogen intake is higher than the output. Some amount of nitrogen is retained in the body, causing a net increase in the body protein. The positive nitrogen balance is observed in growing children, pregnant women, or during recovery after serious illness. So they require more protein because of their demand is much more. Next please. Now there is negative nitrogen balance in which the nitrogen output is higher than the input. Some amount of nitrogen is lost from the body depleting the body protein. Prolonged negative nitrogen balance may even lead to death. Observed in children suffering from kwashiorkor and marasmus. We will be discussing this. Next please. So, negative nitrogen balance may occur due to inadequate dietary intake of protein, the deficiency of a single essential amino acid, or destruction of tissues or serious illness. So, all this can lead to negative nitrogen balance. The growth hormones and insulin promote positive nitrogen balance while corticosteroids result in a negative nitrogen balance. That is the hormonal regulation part. I think you have gone through some hormonal action and metabolism, so you will be understand that. You will be able to understand that. Now, cancer and uncontrolled diabetes cause negative nitrogen balance. Because of the cancer, body proteins are decayed, and because of the diabetes, there is no supply of carbohydrate inside the cell, glucose inside the cell, so proteins are broken down, going to be manifested as negative nitrogen balance, which is commonly termed as cachectic patients. Next please. So, nitrogen is estimated in the diet, feces and urine sample. That is the how much amount we are taking in by the diet and how much we are losing in the feces as well as in the urine. So, we can calculate biological value by this formula: nitrogen absorbed minus nitrogen lost in the metabolism divided by nitrogen absorbed into 100. So, this is just to give you an idea about the biological value of the particular protein, how much it is restored in the body, and how much is stored in the body, how much is going to benefit the body. Next please. Now, protein have other parameters to be assessed, that includes protein efficiency ratio or PER, biological value I have already told you, net protein utilization or NPU, and the chemical score. So, we will see what are those. Next please. Protein efficiency ratio is represented by gain in the weight of rats per gram of protein ingested, calculated as gain in the body weight in gram by protein ingested in gram. So, how much body weight it is gaining out of a particular amount of protein it is taking. Next please. Net protein utilization or NPU is the better nutritional index than biological value. It defines net protein utilization as nitrogen retained divided by the nitrogen absorbed into 100. So, that is a more better parameter to calculate about the protein quality. Next. Now chemical score. This is based on the chemical analysis of protein for consumption of essential amino acids, which is then compared with a reference protein. Reference protein is egg protein. Eggs is the ideal protein which contains all essential amino acids in a very good amount, very good quantity. So egg protein is a reference protein, as I have told you, and in terms of egg protein, the other proteins are compared in terms of their amino acids availability. The chemical score is defined as the ratio between the quantity of the most limiting essential amino acids in the test protein to the quantity of the same amino acid in the egg protein. So that is the chemical score. Next please. So that I have already discussed. Please go through. Next please. Now here is a chart for you which has been given to understand about the nutritional value of the food protein. So what we should take and what we should advise to the patients, that you should know all these parameters and quality of the food so that you can advise accordingly. Now, as I have told you, egg has chemical score, you can see 100, where in case of other protein it is different. So 65 in case of milk, 60 in case of fish, like that. So PER, biological value, NPU and chemical score. And there are some limiting amino acids in different types of proteins. That is very important to understand. If you go on taking rice, you will not be getting lysine, and if you go on taking meat, the sulfur is absent. So what judiciously we do is to combine different types of proteins so that we get sufficient amount of all the amino acids. That is very important to understand. Next please. So what is the requirement of the protein? How much you should take? The requirement of protein is dependent on its nutritive value, as I have already told you, caloric intake and physiological states, whether it is growing, whether she is pregnant or she is lactating. So likewise you have to select what is the amount of protein it should be taken. For an adult, 0.8 to 1 gram per kg body protein per kg body weight is advised to take per day. That is adequate for a healthy normal person. The requirement is nearly double for growing children, pregnant and lactating women. That you have to understand. Next please. So here we come to discuss about the role of vitamins and importance of taking vitamins in our diet. Vitamins are vital for maintaining normal growth and health. Mainly act as coenzymes. Vitamin B, all the B vitamins along with folic acids, as antioxidants like A, E, C and also vitamin K, that is also considered as antioxidant vitamins. And as hormones, A and D, their mechanism of action is like hormones. So they have different types of important vital biological roles in our body. They are essential for proper absorption, metabolism, carbohydrates, proteins of fats and minerals of the body are required for the metabolism of different types of foodstuffs. So because lot of the enzymes, they have cofactors or coenzymes in the form of vitamins. All the B vitamins and along with others, they mainly act as coenzymes. no single food that provide all the vitamins required for our body. So you have to take all again some combinations. So you have to design accordingly. Variety of food should be taken in balanced diet. That we will be discussing later. Especially fruits and vegetables. They are the principal supplier of vitamins. Deficiency of vitamins lead to various disorders. That already we have gone through some of the classes, and you will be knowing in details in your biochemistry classes as well. Next please. Now role of minerals in our body, that is also very, very vital. There are mineral nutrients needed in the body. They came from the food we eat. This food contains a lot of minerals. They are not manufactured by the body, although found in the body and tissues and also in the body fluids. The minerals have vital role in the body system. The minerals work together to perform important functions in the body like fluid and electrolyte balance, sodium, potassium, chloride, blood formation, role of iron in the formation of hemoglobin, building healthy bones, phosphate, calciums has a very important role there, and maintaining healthy immune systems. Almost all the enzymes, signal transducing molecules, immune antigens, all the antibodies response is because of different minerals are involved in activating as a cofactors and as a transducer of the particular pathway. So you have to know about the minerals and consider the minerals intake in our body should be also balanced. Next please. Now what are the major minerals and minor minerals or trace minerals? The major minerals need to consume more than 100 milligrams per day, out of which there are some macromolecules like proteins, carbohydrates, lipids. They supply the minerals or elements we require in a very large quantities like nitrogen, oxygen, hydrogen. But they require also a little more, but not that much amount. They are known as major minerals. At least 5 grams of the mineral in the body we require to store includes calcium, sodium, potassium, chloride, phosphorus, magnesium and sulfur. They are the major minerals which we require to include in our diet, which is present in different foodstuff that you have to know. And regarding the trace minerals which need to consume more than 20 milligram per day, but less than definitely 100 milligram. And the body contains less than 5 grams of the total of these particular minerals. That includes iron, zinc, copper, selenium, chromium, iodide, manganese, molybdenum and fluoride. So these are the minerals we require to consider in our food. Next please. So what are the sources of the minerals? Grossly, there are 2 rich sources of minerals. One from the vegetables. So that is also very important to take vegetables in our diet. Vegetables and fruits. And also the nuts. Different types of nuts also supply a lot of minerals. Next please. Now we'll a little bit discuss about the water. In the biochemistry classes, early classes, I have told you about the importance of water in our body. So just recapitulate about the water intake that is required to be sufficient to run the whole biological system. As you all know, water is equal to life. So water constitutes 70% of our body. So our body is immersed, all the cells are immersed in water, as well as inside there is also a lot of water. So without water, there is no formation or tissues or cells of the human body or any other living bodies. Required for all the biological process. As for examples, it provides perfect polar environment. That is the environment we require to organize our cells, our proteins, our lipids. They organize because we have a polar environment. Takes part in the metabolic reactions. Water is the reactant and product of all the reaction almost, and it is also having a high dielectric constant. So the catalysis can be possible because of the presence of water in our body. So enzyme can catalyze the association and dissociation of the substances, or analytes can happen because water is there in our body. It is essential for transporting food, hormones and other nutrients throughout the body. So excellent vehicle. It flushes out toxins and other wastes out of the body in the form of urine and sweat. It regulates the body temperature also. So it has many roles, and our body is non-existent without water. So we are always finding which planets outside our planet contains water, so that there may be possibility of life. Next please. Last but not the least, here it is the importance of dietary fiber to consider in your diet, in your daily intake, in your food. So the complex carbohydrates, what are fibers? The complex carbohydrates that are not digested by the human enzymes are collectively referred to as dietary fiber. These include cellulose, hemicellulose, pectin, lignin, gums and mucilage. Some of the fibers are digestible by the enzymes of the intestinal bacteria, as for example pectins and gums to some extent. So fruits, vegetables, corn, salads and cereals are highly fibrous foods. So you have to know what are the sources of dietary fiber, and accordingly you have to take that type of foods when you are considered to make a diet. Next please. So what is the benefit? There are a number of benefits. Some of that includes prevents constipation. Fiber helps to maintain the normal mobility of the gastrointestinal tract and prevents the constipation thereby. It eliminates bacterial toxins. That is very important. Not only bacterial toxin, we have a lot of toxins also in our foods and vegetables nowadays, because they are all having a lot of insecticides during their culture. So fiber absorbs large quantities of water, and also the toxic compounds, which are water soluble mainly, produced by the intestinal bacteria and from the foodstuffs we take, lead to increased fecal mass because they absorb along with the water, and it's easier to expel them from our body. So that is, the fiber plays a very important role. So now the study has already established that patients not taking fiber have lot of gastrointestinal disease, including the colonic cancer itself. So fiber intake should be considered. You should not consider any foods which don't contain any fiber. That is very important to understand. Next please. So Now you can understand the importance of fruits and vegetables. We must consider this in our diet. Regular intake we should have because contain important vitamins. I have already discussed. Almost many minerals are present there in the vegetables and fruits. Dietary fibers, and also there are a lot of phytochemicals that are present in that fruits and vegetables, which gives us lot of different types of benefit, including antioxidant activity, including the raise in our immune systems. So that is very important that you should consider to take at least and advise the patients to take the fruits and vegetables in your diet. A diet high in fruits and vegetables is ideal. It protects against many diseases, including the cancer, diabetes, heart disease, etc. So that is a very, very important aspect of the food that we should know. Next please. Here I am going to discuss some of the common nutritional deficiency disorders, because this is the class of nutrition and we have to definitely consider some of the disorders which due to nutritional deficiency and can be corrected by the accurate nutrition or accurate diet for the particular type of patients. So next please. Protein energy malnutrition. That is very, very common in all the developing countries as well as in our countries. Many of the small children are suffering from this type of disease, which can be corrected with food correction or protein correction. So protein energy malnutrition or PEM, sometimes called protein caloric malnutrition, PCM, is the most common nutritional disorder in the developing countries. It is prevalent in infants and preschool children. Out of this, kwashiorkor and marasmus are the two extreme forms of this protein energy malnutrition. We will discuss about the kwashiorkor and marasmus. Next please. So what is kwashiorkor? Kwashiorkor means sickness of the deposed child. That means disease of the child, disease the child gets when the next baby is born. That means he is now devoid of the particular foods which he should require, which he should have. So, because now he is neglected. Now, occurrence and causes of the kwashiorkor is predominantly found in the children between 1 to 5 years of age. In mainly preschool stage, this is primarily due to insufficient intake of proteins, mainly protein deficiency, as the diet of a weaning child mainly consists of carbohydrates only. Only carbohydrates are fed, not the sufficient amount of protein. Next please. Thereby, edema occurs due to lack of adequate plasma proteins to maintain water distribution between blood and tissues. You know, oncotic pressure is reduced here, so fluid is going from the extravascular space to the tissues. Disturbances in the metabolism of protein, carbohydrate and fat. Definitely enzymes are defective in that case because lack of protein. So all this type of metabolism are now disturbed. Several vitamin also deficiency also occur. Many of the vitamins we get from our amino acid source. So if proteins and amino acids are deficient, like tyrosine gives rise to tryptophan. So like this type of amino acid deficiency lead to different vitamin deficiencies also. Plasma retinol binding protein is reduced. Naturally, the retinol effect is not normal here. The immunological response of the child is to infection is also very low because antibodies are not being able to form because of lack of protein. Next please. So what is the treatment that you can suggest very nicely now understanding the previous discussion that you require to supplement with protein. In this case you require about 3 to 4 gram of protein per kg body weight per day. That will control the kwashiorkor. This can be monitored by measuring plasma albumin concentration. If it is gradually raised, then it's okay. And disappearance of edema and gain in the body weight. So that is a symptomatic improvement and clinical sign that you can assess. So next please. Marasmus is another form of the PEM. Literally means waste, to waste. It mainly occurs in children under 1 year of age. In kwashiorkor 1 to 5 years, but here it is under 1 year of age. Marasmus is predominantly due to the deficiency of calories. Protein, not only protein deficient, it is mainly deficiency of the calories. So this is usually observed in children given watery gruels of the cereals, like to supplement the mother's breast milk. That is a pity that most of the child are getting this in our country till now. Next please. The symptoms of marasmus include growth retardation, muscle wasting or emaciation, anemia and weakness. A marasmic child does not show edema or decreased concentration of plasma protein. A little bit all calorie is lost here mainly. So this difference between marasmus and the kwashiorkor you can just understand. Next please. Some of the nutritional deficiencies lead to anemias, very common. Now there are 3 types of anemia: macrocytic anemia, microcytic anemia and normocytic anemia. That means when RBC size is reduced, that is microcytic. When RBC size is increased, that is macrocytic. And when RBC size is same as a normal reference range, it is normocytic. Now, in case of microcytic anemia, which is very common with reduced RBC size, occurs due to the deficiency of iron, copper and pyridoxine. So, vitamins and mineral deficiency here. The macrocytic anemia mainly occurs due to deficiency of folic acid and vitamin B12. Next. Whereas the normocytic anemia, where the size of RBC is normal, is mainly found in protein energy malnutrition. That means in kwashiorkor and marasmus you will find this type of anemia. Next. Now another nutritional disorders that we must consider nowadays is obesity. Previously, obesity was considered to be a disease of the developed countries, where a lot of overnutrition is there. But nowadays, many of the patients in our country also suffering from obesity, and this leads to different type of disease like diabetes, including diabetes, heart disease, hypertension. So obesity is nothing but accumulation of excess of fat in your body, mainly under the skin. There are different factors, of course, of obesity. Genetic factors are also there, but we have to know which patients are obese and how to treat them with some nutritional advice. That is very important. Next. Now, how will know or calculate which patient is obese or not? The best parameter is BMI, that is body mass index. This means is calculated as weight in gram, weight in kg per by height in meter square. Also weight in pounds into 703 by height in meter square. So that is why BMI is calculated and we know what is the status of this fat of the particular patients. Next please. So I have told you what is BMI. It is a measure of the body fat based on your weight in relation to your height. It is more of an indicator than a direct measurement of a person's total body fat. Definitely it is an indicator. And as the BMI score increases, so does the person's total body fat increases. So become obese. So there are status according to the BMI, an individual can be placed. Next please. Next please. So who has given this classification? WHO has given this classification. So there are different category of weight status: underweight, normal range, overweight, and then obese, obese class 1, class 2, class 3. And the score of BMI in case of underweight when it is less than 18.5. So they are having some malnutrition definitely in those cases. Now normal healthy persons should have a BMI of 18.5 to 24.9. That is ideal. Beyond 25 to 29.9 it is overweight. So you try to reduce your weight, otherwise the disease will come in your body. As obese, when we call it, is score is more than or equal to 30, and afterwards there are different gradation of obesities. So you should always consider the BMI of a person when you are going to check about his nutritional status also. Next. So I have tried to give you the idea of the different way we require the diet to formulate. Roles of different important constituents of the food, and you have also been able to understand little bit how the deficiency of the particular type of food can give rise to some disease. So to keep yourself healthy as well as healthy advice to our patients, to make them healthy, you have to know what is the role of nutrition, which is, sorry to say, is not always considered in our profession nowadays. So that is why you should understand about the nutrition along with all the modern medical science aspects. So here you have to know how to make a balanced diet for a normal healthy person, and also the patients who are suffering from some kind of illness. Maybe he is diabetes, maybe he is hypertensive, maybe he is obese, maybe he is a growing child, there is a woman, lactating woman, pregnant woman. So all sorts of dietary advice you should also include when you are going to treat these patients. So now what is a balanced diet? A balanced diet means getting the right types of amounts of foods and drinks to supply nutrition and energy for maintaining body cells, tissues and organs, and for supporting normal growth and development. So in the next class will try to understand how to formulate a diet according to the status of the particular subjects. Thank you all for sound listening. There will be more discussions on these aspects when the interactive classes are opened. Thank you.